turning back again to the French elections. Ralph Schoellhammer is a political theorist and professor at Webster University in Vienna, but covering politics across the EU and indeed even including in the UK as well, and joins us now. Good morning to you, Ralph.
Great to be on with you, Julia. I hope you're doing well.
Always lovely to see you. OK, now, look, big gamble from Emmanuel Macron, the French president, about whether or not to hold a snap election much earlier than he needed to. He went with that risk. How's it paid off?
Well, I think the most interesting observation of France at this point is, so the polls predicted that Le Pen's party will get around 36%. It looks now it's going to be 34, 35%. And why this is interesting is, in the past, as you surely know, right-wing parties tended to do better in actual elections than they did in the polls, because there was this kind in the United States, they call it the shy Trump voter effect. So people, they don't tell pollsters whom they plan to vote for, especially if it's a right-wing party. I think this is disappearing. And that's an important, I would almost call it a historical shift. People no longer are afraid to admit that they're voting for right-wing parties.
Yeah.
So there's a cultural shift going on. I think we will see something similar with reform in the UK. So this means that there was once a time when it was kind of considered as, you know, socially unsavory to vote for right-wing parties or quote-unquote radical parties, which I think is an overused expression these days. So this is shifting. They are becoming more mainstream. They're becoming normalized in the political discourse.
And particularly among young people, whereas here in the UK, the accepted belief, the norm is that, well, young people vote on the left.
Yes.
It's completely changed, and we saw in those European elections, which of course sparked the snap election. It's fascinating, though, the alliances that were formed as soon as you know, they'd seen the National Rally, Le Pen, Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella's party doing so well in the European elections. There were these alliances formed on the, you know, on the left and then in the centre. People, all these disparate parties under the PR system coming together. And now the cry has gone out from those two groups. Well, whoever's come second against any of the Le Pen's candidates, you know, you run against them, and everyone else should drop out and give them a clear chance. If that did happen, would that mean that National Rally, Le Pen's party, didn't have a majority not an overall majority, it didn't have a majority at all in the Parliament, or would she still be likely to win a majority?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, I think it's likely, but it's too soon to tell. It depends a little bit now on the attitudes of the French people. But there's one thing I have to say. I think very often, and that's also true all across the continent and also in the UK, what we tend to call centre-right, I would argue, is in truth moderate left. Say about Le Pen what you want, right? Say about the National Rally what you want. But they are definitely a patriotic party. So I find it odd that Emmanuel Macron, who presented himself very often as a, you know, at least a right-leaning president or a right-leaning politician, that he's now pretty much allowing or calling on the French people to vote for the radical left, who are in parts openly, you know, pro-Islamist, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel to an extent that Le Pen is not. No, her father was. I'm the first one to admit that. But she is not, and we shall not be held responsible for the sins of our fathers.
And this is the key thing. There's no doubt at all. Yeah, you know, Jean-Marie Le Pen and the National Front, and even under the early days of her leadership, Marine Le Pen, this was a, you know, I would say, use that term correctly, a far-right party. As you say, National Rally, it's been rebranded, but their policies are very different. Their people are very different. It is no longer on that extreme. I was mentioning earlier, I find it absolutely fascinating in this country. We talk about, well, this country and across Europe, it's always the far right, bad, associate with racism and you know, horrible, nasty policies. And then we talk about the radical left, as if the communists and the socialists are not incredibly extreme, incredibly authoritarian, and allied, Communist Party allied to some of the most murderous regimes in the world. And you add into the anti-Semitism on the far and even moderate left that we've seen in recent years. It's a completely different picture. And again, the notion of what is centrist now, same in the UK, same as in France, same as I think in Germany, Austria, Italy, everywhere. The notion of what is centrist now is now what would used to have been called, in this party, in this country, Labour Party policy. It's completely changed.
Yeah, and I think that's true. And I believe, and I still use the terms left and right, and we all do, and they will stick around for a while. But I think the true division at the moment that becomes glaringly obvious, again, all over the West, is there's a division between those who are still comfortable with ideas of patriotism and even, if you want to use the term, nationalism, and those who are not, who are believing that they are beyond all this, right? I would not even say they're anti-patriotic, but they're like post-patriotic. This is, for example, why I think that Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak, they're the same. I'm not saying they're not anti-patriotic, but they are they are beyond all this, right? They are truly the citizens of the world. They are kind of this, the cosmopolitan, as they said when you ask them, Westminster or Davos, and I think that's a direct quote, right, where Keir Starmer said, well, Davos, no doubt about it, right? So they don't hide it, or that they have problems, again, like Keir Starmer, they cannot even bring themselves to wear an English football jersey or soccer jersey, whatever term you want to use, when they go to the pub. It's kind of this discomfort with this. And I think this is the same thing within France, kind of the battle that is raging, I would say, all over the West, is between those who kind of want to go back to a more, patriotic, let's say, nationalist-inspired politics, and those who believe that this is reactionary and off the path.
But isn't it also just a sort of a reality check in terms of the impact of various sort of globalist, technocratic policies? Open borders sounds great, and you get these sort of middle-class people going, oh, my child can't go and go for a year's gap experience working in the Swiss Alps. Oh, no, Swiss wouldn't be Switzerland, but, the French Alps. I mean, they're completely ignoring the impact of open borders on lots of ordinary working people and their wages. And it's fascinating how much, even the analysis I'm watching here in the UK, so much of it's all about the economy. And it's about it's the economy in France. It's about immigration, but it's also about crime. Now, Matt Goodwin, a professor here in politics, some extraordinary stats that came up. These are official French stats from official bodies. Although non-French people, foreigners, make up 8% of the population of France, they account for 24% of prison inmates. 77% of rapes that are solved in Paris are involving a foreign perpetrator. 54% of street crimes and 40% of vehicle thefts in Nice, again, south of France, an awful lot of non-French living there, and 38% of burglaries and 31% of muggings across France. You are looking, we've seen a spate of terror attacks, Islamist attacks on Jews in particular. There's no doubt at all the French people are saying, hold on a minute, something is going wrong. And the centrists, the Macron, the media are all saying, nothing to see here. And the French people are going, yes, there is something to see.
It's even worse than that, because I think you hit the nail on the head at the beginning of what you just said, which is that so there is the kind of politics that we believe we can influence via elections, and then on the other hand you have the permanent bureaucracy that ultimately is responsible for what's happening. Because if you look at the migration debate, again, whether it's in the United Kingdom, whether it's in continental Europe, you have politicians that during every election season talk tough. But then it turns out, we can't do anything because there's this law and there's that international convention and there's this treaty we signed 60 years ago. And this is, I think, what people are mostly getting upset with is who is responsible, right? There's this huge body of unelected, anonymous bureaucrats who pretty much make all these decisions that directly impact your life, but you don't know how to vote them out. This is also, by the way, I think what motivated Brexit in many ways, and still justifiably so does, is it's not that the British don't like Europe, the Europeans don't like Europe. They say it's this anonymous, deliberately non-transparent body that makes so many far-reaching decisions.
Which have a huge impact on our life.
Exactly.
Just finally, I want to ask you, Ralph, in terms of whoever, let's say Marine Le Pen's sort of protege, Jordan Bardella, just 28 years old, it becomes the next Prime Minister of France. If he doesn't have an overall majority, it depends on how much he can actually get done working with Macron and his centrists. However, if they are able to get things done, would a Le Pen, Bardella, government in France, would that be good or bad for Britain in terms of dealing with the migrant crisis and in terms of the likely Prime Minister we'll have on Friday morning, Keir Starmer's ability to negotiate?
Well, it depends, right? Because I think the first approach with migration will be a game of hot potato. Like, and everybody will try to push it further and further away. So the French will blame the British will blame the French. So I think that could be problematic. On a larger issue, this is something that Nigel Farage said. And even though I think that he sometimes brings a little bit of too much of a distance between himself and the European right, but in one aspect, he's correct. Le Pen's biggest seduction at the moment, or temptation at the moment, is their extremely economically, I would say, left-leaning policies. For example, when she says they're going to reduce the retirement age to 60, the French economy economy is not in a good state. So just to make this one point, because again, that's true all over the West. Our economies are at the current point not doing well. We have spent too much, we have indebted ourselves too much, we have basically ruined the future of our children. And to reform all of this, you will need more than populism. Don't get me wrong. I sympathize with Farage.
Slogans aren't going to cut it. You're going to need
Precisely.
Okay.
And some of these things will be painful, right? The French economy, they need reforms, they will be painful. The British economy will need reforms that are going to be painful.
I mean, the French could just take an hour off their lunch break. That might stop.
Yeah. And I think sometimes these populists, again, whom I generally are very well, inclined towards, they think they can just kind of present themselves, oh, we're going to heal all these issues without inflicting any pain. But at some point, short-term pain will be necessary. However, last point on this, I think if you tell the people the truth, that actually it will resonate with them. Because deep down, the British people, the European people, they know it can no longer go on like this. Okay. They're just waiting for somebody to tell them as it is. So I think sometimes honesty, even if it's painful, or even the painful truth, can be in your votes.
Really interesting to talk to you. As always, Ralph Schoellhammer, thank you very much. He's a professor at Webster University in Vienna. Quick final word on this to Sam Armstrong before we take a break.
Well, look, other European presidents, prime ministers, I don't care where they are, Spain, Portugal, Italy, of course, has already made this turn, but Greece, all across Eastern Europe, even Scandinavia, Northern Europe, need to watch out. This kind of result is coming to them too, unless, that is, they choose to grip one of the great crises of our time, which is migration.
Stop calling everyone a bigot and deal with people's genuine, completely legitimate concerns.
Spoiler alert, your voters are bothered by migration. You know that already. You know the result if you don't do it, so deal with it.
And telling people you're going to deal with it and they're not dealing with it ain't gonna hack it anymore.